Fire presentation, 7 strategies to extinguish business risk. Paul Hager of ITP and myself, Mindy Rowland of the Employer Group. Welcome everybody here, and thanks so much for attending, or maybe you're listening to the webinar version as well. Just a little background about me. I am a employment lawyer and a litigator by trade. I practiced at a law firm in downtown Madison for about 13 years before moving over to the Employer Group. The Employer Group is a HR consulting business that does all kinds of things for small to medium-sized businesses, mostly in the Madison and Wisconsin area, but we are actually in 29 different states. We help small and medium-sized businesses with their payroll, with benefits administration, and of course with a lot of HR consulting. So we help out businesses and essentially serve as their external HR department. Bill Henry from ITP and I got together and recognized that ITP and TEG have a similar demographic of clients. And we thought what might be nice is to get together and have a discussion about some of the things that we can see for small, medium-sized businesses to help them extinguish, of course, because of the fire theme, extinguish business risk, but at a minimum to minimize it. So I'm going to go through the first 4 of the 7 strategies, and then I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and he's going to come in and finish it up. All right, fire number 1. Out-of-date handbooks. Obviously, everybody knows what an employee handbook is, but why bother to have a handbook, right? First, it's a communication tool to your employees. It sets the expectations and the consequences for their employees so they understand what it is that's expected of them, and also, of course, what it is that they get. It's a way for you to make sure that you're consistently communicating what it is that you expect of your employees and consequences for certain behavior. Of course, it's not a contract, and any good handbook indicates very clearly that it's not a contract, but instead it's a compilation of policies, practices, and the benefits that your company has. Another good reason to have a handbook is that it helps to enforce policies consistently. It can serve as the basis for employee performance. It's also handy because you can actually point to specific policies, which of course helps when you're disciplining an employee. You're not just saying, oh, you've got a bad attitude. Instead, for example, you're looking at the handbook and saying, we expect you to do X, Y, and Z. Look at the handbook, you received the handbook, you acknowledge that you received the handbook. So it's time for you to follow up with what it is that we put forward in the handbook. The handbook also defines the employment relationship between you and your employees. It establishes an employment at will relationship. That's important because in almost every state, including Wisconsin, the default is that employees are employed at will. That means you can terminate an employee because you don't like the red shirt they wore that day, and likewise, the employee can quit because they don't like the fact that you opted not to shave your beard for the entire month of November, for example. So employees and employers alike have the opportunity and the ability to terminate the employment from both sides of it. One reason that you want to make sure that it's very clear in the handbook is, for example, if you've got a renegade supervisor out there who says something to an employee like, you know what, as long as you perform well, you've got a job here forever. Things like that might alter the default principle of an employment at will relationship. So a handbook makes very, very clear that no matter what anybody says, the rule is this: you need to be, you are employed at will. A handbook also lays out employers' rights that it may not otherwise have. Employers' rights, that it may not otherwise have. Example, things like paid time off or commissions paid out when an employee leaves, drug testing, background checks, etc., like that. Those are things that if you tell the employee you're going to do it, the employer's got the opportunity and the right and the ability to do those things, but otherwise it may not have that right to do it. A great example is PTO. In the state of Wisconsin, if you offer up PTO to your employees and you don't indicate one way or another whether or not it'll get paid out, there is an argument that employees are entitled to their PTO when they walk out the door, if they leave or if you let them go. However, if you lay out very clearly that they're not allowed to take that with them, if you can't take the PTO with you when you go, for example, then that's clear, and the employer's got that right to keep that PTO as opposed to having paid it out. So that's an example of giving opportunities for an employer that it may not otherwise have. Of course, a handbook, too, it serves as a reference for employers and employees alike. It minimizes wasting your supervisor's time, your manager's times, or even maybe the owner of the company if you're a small business. Answering questions that really, there's a resource, there's a reference guide, and there's an easy way to find what it is that the employee needs to know. More often than not, employees have questions about leave more than anything else. And so quick questions about leave, for example, are perfect handbook questions where you're not worried on a Friday afternoon wasting your time listening to one of your employees try to figure out whether, how much PTO they're going to get next week. They can take a look at their handbook and figure that out. So handbooks are obviously an excellent resource. As an aside, when I was an employment lawyer working at the law firm, at one point in time, I actually wrote an article right at the end, right before I left, saying, I'm not sure handbooks are that good. I'm not sure that they're appropriate anymore. They're losing steam. But as I'm now in the HR world, I recognize that they really are a helpful tool, somewhat of a Bible for employees and employers to go through and make sure they understand exactly what the playing terms are for each job. So handbooks are great. However, they're only as good as they are current and they are applicable. There can be changes in the laws. There can be outdated policies, and there can be cookie-cutter policies that are appropriate for someone else's business. One theme you're going to hear from me more than once is that the internet is not your lawyer, and the internet is not your HR team or your HR consultant. There certainly are great resources. The internet's excellent. I use it all the time, and even to assist me in my job. But when it comes to handbooks and certain other HR practices or contracts, it's not something you want to pull off the internet. There are changes in the law that are happening all the time that either an employment lawyer or an HR professional can help you out with. Your policies, if you have got an out-of-date handbook, may no longer reflect the culture or the norms of what it is that your company's has happened to it in the past several years. For example, if you started out with a handful of employees, you may have been a lot more lax in some of your policies, and your handbook may have reflected that. But if you've grown to 25 employees, all of a sudden it's time to put some structure in place, and an outdated handbook that says you can basically come and go when you please is not going to be too handy when all of a sudden you're trying to track when 25 employees are coming and going as opposed to the 5. And of course, cookie-cutter policies, again, the internet, finding a sample handbook and throwing it in and saying, all I need is a handbook, check it off my list. The problem is there are a lot of policies out there that may be appropriate for someone else's business, but that are not appropriate for your business. For example, grooming policies or a looks protocol as far as what you expect your employees to wear. And again, that's an easy example, but a bigger example is, you may be small enough that you're not subject to the Family Medical Leave Act, but if you indicate in your handbook, because you grabbed it off the internet, that all employees are entitled to 12 weeks, unpaid leave. That's obviously granting a higher right and more of a right than you have to under the size of your business. So it's dangerous, hence the fire and the extinguishing phrases. It's dangerous to be dealing with an out-of-date handbook. So how do you extinguish the risk? And I'm going to point out the picture that I've got here on my next slide. This is actually a excerpt from the Disney Handbook in 1943. Take a look at it. So it says, Penthouse Club. For all particulars, memberships, and like that, check with Walt. Men only. Sorry, gals, is what it says. So I'm not sure what the Penthouse Club was at Disney, but it does look like people are bathing themselves and eating and enjoying, at least on the cartoon. So again, the notion of having an outdated policy, and of course this is very outdated and meant to be exaggeratory, but it does give the example that out-of-date policies, you may even have illegal terms in your handbooks if you're not regularly updating them. We recommend taking a look at your handbook about once a year, by the way. So extinguishing the risk, an annual review of the handbooks. Again, once a year, once every 18 months, 2 years is pushing it a little bit, but at least once a year is what we recommend from a best practice standpoint. The other thing is to take into account your company's culture. You want to make sure that when you've got a handbook, you are taking a look at it and you are looking at what is the culture of my company. I don't want to borrow somebody else's culture. I want to actually spend a little time taking a look at how do I want to communicate to my employees what the guidelines are and what the expectations and the consequences are for working here at my amazing business. And if you're not an expert on putting a handbook together, which probably you're not because you're at this seminar or listening to this webinar. Get an expert to help you out, whether it's an employment lawyer or whether it's an HR professional. The employer group does handbooks for clients every single day and employee reviews of handbooks every single day to make sure that our clients are up to speed. And that's oftentimes how we get a client in the door, is because they're interested in having someone take a look at their handbook, and that's a great way to start. It provides a very an excellent resource towards getting a look and having the conversation about what kind of place you want your business to be. All right, fire number 2, ignoring compliance issues. I want to say this is my most boring slide, but it's not. I think it gets a little bit worse, so I'll try to spice it up a little bit. Ignoring compliance issues. Regulatory compliance, and then I've got the what? All regulatory compliance is laws that are applicable to you, both as a business and as an employer. An example, the Fair Labor Standards Act is a compliance issue that you want to make sure that you're keeping track of. So here are some of the compliance issues that may come up, and these are just a couple of examples. The FLSA, or the Fair Labor Standards Act, the exempt versus non-exempt when it comes to overtime laws. Those are issues that you may assume that just because one of your employees is hourly and has been hourly forever, that they're entitled to overtime. Or the flip side is you've had an employee that you've had salaried forever, and as a result, you haven't been paying that employee overtime. Now, I don't know if any of you have been paying attention, but the FLSA is about to see a change, courtesy of President Obama making an executive order to change some of the exempt versus non-exempt overtime laws, such that the rules are changing, and what becomes exempt versus non-exempt from a salary standpoint, how much money somebody has to make before they're entitled to exempt status. Those are all changing coming up here in the next few months. So that's an example of something you really, really want to review. It does go hand in hand with the handbook somewhat, but you may not have in your handbook a reference to exempt versus non-exempt employees, but there still are changes that need to be made and reviews that need to be made of who you consider an exempt versus a non-exempt employee, and that's just one example. Another is the Affordable Care Act. Many small businesses may be under the misapprehension that they aren't subject to the ACA because they're not 50 or more employees. Well, under the Affordable Care Act, you still need to track your number of FTEs, or your full-time equivalent employees, and you need to make sure you're providing benefits uniformly, even if you don't have to provide benefits under the ACA. Once you do, you have to provide those benefits uniformly, and that is a mandate by the ACA that you are indeed subject to. So I know the Affordable Care Act is very intimidating and concerning to a lot of small businesses out there, just because there's been so many ups and downs and changes, and things have been repealed and then they've been put back into place, and there's even something going on right now about changing the number of employees before the ACA is applicable to businesses. That's happening, as I do this webinar right now. So these are all kinds of things you want to keep up to date with. Again, that phrase, regulatory compliance. Other examples are the Family Medical Leave Act, Wisconsin's Fair Employment Act, and of course all of your federal discrimination laws, the plethora of all the acronyms, right? The ADA, Title VII, the ADEA, which is the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and the like. So all of those are compliance issues that definitely rise to the level of a fire number 2, and make sure that you are on the lookout for it. So how do we extinguish it? An easy answer is education. Seminars, webinars, newsletters. I mentioned earlier that the internet is not your employment lawyer, and the internet is not your HR professional, but there are a lot of webinars out there. There's a lot of seminars. SHRM, for example, is an excellent, SHRM is an excellent resource for taking a look at what it is that you need to keep up to date with when it comes to HR matters. One thing I always like to say is HR is not a 4-letter word. It's just a 2-letter word. So don't be scared about human resources. Don't be scared about the compliance. Just start paying attention and looking at it. There are a lot of free seminars and free webinars out there by a lot of law firms, a lot of HR companies, really seeking, not only to get your business, but also to educate you. So be on the lookout for those. And of course, one thing we've seen in the last few years are a lot of social media groups. A great example is LinkedIn does a really nice job where you can join a smaller subset of various groups that can keep you up to speed. And some of them are small business groups, some of them are female-only groups, and there's also HR groups, HR Madison groups or HR Wisconsin groups that get conversations flowing and discussions, and you can feel free to maybe ask a question or two of somebody else there. Of course, the smartest thing to keep in mind when it comes to regulatory compliance is know what you know and get help with what you don't. You're not going to know everything. Very few of you listening to this are in the business of HR, right? You've got employees, but your businesses are based entirely on some other business model. So if you've got something you don't know how to handle, find somebody who can handle it for you. HR is like any other vendor that you might have. I mean, you don't try to fix your copy machine yourself because you hire somebody to do that. Don't try to fix your HR by yourself too, unless you're educated and understand what's going on. So either education or find somebody who can help you out. Fire number 3, ERISA benefits ignorance. So ERISA is an employee benefit. It's a federal law that requires certain information be provided to employees. One of the facets. It requires certain information to be provided to employees when you're providing certain benefits. So currently, ERISA's, it used to just, the thought was, or at least the mindset was, I only need to worry about ERISA if I have health insurance. Well, that's not the case. It actually covers dental insurance, vision insurance, life insurance, FSAs or flexible spending accounts. Sometimes they're called Section 125 accounts, HRAs, which are health reimbursement accounts, EAPs as well, employee assistance programs, and that's one that people rarely think about, but under certain circumstances, your EAP is also covered by ERISA, which means you're obligated to distribute certain information to your employees about that plan that's mandated by this federal law, as well as wellness plans. That's another one that people oftentimes don't realize. By implementing a wellness plan, they don't realize they may have obligations under ERISA to distribute either a summary plan description or other information required to the employees whenever you offer a certain benefit. And then accidental death and dismemberment insurance, which is a little bit newer on the scene, but it's also covered by ERISA generally. So one of the concepts of ERISA for purposes of this discussion is that there are plan documents that must be put together and that must be distributed to the employees for every plan or every benefit that you have that's covered by ERISA. A lot of businesses, especially again small businesses who are in the business of what they're working on as opposed to the business of employee benefits or personnel issues, don't realize that by adding a wellness program or by adding an EAP, they actually put an additional burden on themselves sometimes in order to make sure that they're distributing the right amount of information and the right substantive information to their employees for those benefits. All right, how do you extinguish fire 3? How do you get yourself out of an ERISA trap? There's a couple of options that are come to mind right away, and they are somewhat obvious, but at least worth talking about. One is to have a legal review of your benefit plans. Have an employee benefits attorney take a look at all of your benefits plans, update them, give the information to have distributed to your employees. That's an excellent comprehensive approach. It's also very expensive. If any of you have worked with law firms before, you're probably pretty familiar that they bill generally at an hourly rate, and they're not cheap. It is excellent work, though, speaking as a lawyer myself. Another option that's much less expensive but is new to the scene is what's called an ERISA wrap document. What it is, it's a document that goes through, looks at all of the benefits that you offer and makes sure that in kind of a comprehensive overview type that it covers every single mandated language, risk conversation, everything that's required by ERISA. It's all in one document and kind of wraps all of your benefits that you offer around and says, for every benefit that you offer, here's all the information that you need to know. And it does it in sort of a generic sense. I like to think of it as a burrito with all of your benefits on the inside and the tortillas wrapping around, and understanding that it covers everything and make sure that you're compliant with anything if it comes to ERISA. It's a real overreaching document that's not expensive and can definitely be put together both by lawyers. They're also an HR team. We recently started doing it in the last 6 months and are seeing a lot of positive results. The last fire, before I hand it over to Paul, is rogue ex-employees. As some of you probably know, and all of you at least have a hint about, former employees present unique risks to businesses. It doesn't really matter whether they're terminated, whether they quit. The risk is still there. You know, they may be disgruntled because they got let go, or even if they quit, they may have quit because they're angry about something. They may be desperate from a financial standpoint. Maybe they're having a hard time getting a new job. But in any event, it puts the company in a vulnerable position when you've got a former employee out there who hasn't moved on for whatever reason. A couple of things to keep in mind in this day and age: The ramifications of a rogue ex-employee, let's talk about social media just for a second. It's become quite the trendy outlet for employee frustrations. They can post on Facebook, put on LinkedIn, they can rate your company, whether it's Yelp if you're more of a service provider, or all kinds of options to talk about how frustrated they are. There's actually websites dedicated to getting employee reviews of some of the larger companies that some applicants will take a look at before they apply to a company. So social media and the web in general is out there, and it's definitely something that you want to keep in mind and not duck your head into the sand to. Lawsuits are obviously an obvious concern for your rogue or your unhappy ex-employees or your former employees. Whether the employee's got any merit to a claim that he or she would bring or not, whether it's a discrimination claim, a suit for unpaid wages, leave that they didn't think that they got, et cetera, whether there's any merit to it or not, lawsuits are expensive. They're expensive because you have to hire a lawyer, you're taking time out of your schedule as business owners or high-level management, and you're dealing with the lawyer, but you're also out of the office. It affects the morale at your office if people are hearing about one of the employees bringing a lawsuit. So even if it's a truly frivolous claim, it's still expensive, both from an out of your pocket, but also some of those less obvious costs, including time out of the office and the morale that goes on when you've got a lawsuit pending. Unhappy former employees obviously affect your current employees. If you, like many companies today, have made an effort to make sure that where you work is a happy place, chances are the employees are going to make friends with each other. Just because an employee leaves doesn't mean that the employee and the current employee and the former employee don't remain friends. Some of that unhappiness that a former employee has, it can infect your entire workforce if it's still kind of leaking in through the current employees. So even if you've cut off the tie with that employee, maybe they had a bad attitude and they needed to go, you may not have eliminated the risk of this rogue former employee because they may be still affecting your current workforce by virtue of their continued relationships with your employees. So all of those things that you really want to keep track of, and that's why it merits a fire number 4 on our 7 risks, because rogue ex-employees are definitely something to be on the lookout for and to be sensitive to. So how can we extinguish it? And I do like this picture of the angry mob coming at you with pitchforks. One really nice way to at least minimize the risk is a severance agreement. What a severance agreement does is you, in exchange for handing the employee a certain amount of money, you require that they release any potential claims. That will very, very quickly become, that gets rid of the lawsuit, right? They can't bring a claim against you or the company for any claims that are listed. That's excellent. In the release or in the severance agreement or the separation agreement, as they're sometimes called, you can also put in there that they can't badmouth the company. Now, are you going to know every single thing that they say? Of course not. But it does sometimes, just because it's written down and the employee agreed to it, that's probably worth 95% of the trouble. And for the most part, if somebody reads something and it says, look, if you don't do these things, I'm going to get my money back. If they say, I can't talk, I can't speak poorly, I need to be cooperative, I can't reach out to current employees at the company in any negative light, all of those things, chances are the employee is probably going to go with that. Just a caveat regarding the severance agreements, and here's my next reference to the internet. It's not your lawyer and not your HR expert. Severance agreements are only as good as they are enforceable, and it is not a one-size-fits-all agreement. For example, there is several different provisions for an employee who is over 40 and leaving your company versus an employee who's under 40. So there's not just a one agreement that you got back in the day from some lawyer 5 years ago, and now that's the agreement that you use every time somebody leaves your workforce. That one's not going to cut it. Not only has the law changed, but even based on which employee, who employee, the circumstances, other agreements that the employee may have signed, all of those things need to get wrapped into making sure that the agreement is enforceable. Otherwise, what's the point? If you're going to hand the employee money in exchange for release, you want to make sure that it's enforceable. So the internet's not your lawyer. They're not your HR expert. So find a lawyer to help you with the severance agreement. They don't take very long. Find an HR expert who can help you out. And I know TEG does that, and we're happy to help. They're more often than not definitely worth the expense of making sure that you are minimizing, to the extent that you can, the risk of an angry employee out there bad-mouthing your company, bad-mouthing the business, and potentially filing a claim against you. So with that, that's my four fires. Hopefully, we've extinguished them all. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Paul and let him talk to you about the last three fires regarding data security.
Thanks, Mindy. So we're going to talk about fire number 5, lost devices. So we talk all the time about how devices can be lost and what is your plan going to be. A few statistics to scare you into actually believing when we say this stuff. Keep in mind that 5 to 10% chance of of laptops being stolen over the course of 3 years. So if you have 100 laptops in the workforce, you're going to lose 10 of those over the next 3 years. Only 5% of those 10 are ever recovered. So once these devices are gone, law enforcement is rarely able to get them back for you. And theft accounts for about 25% of that. So angry employees, or even not angry employees, as we see it, unfortunately, a fair amount of number of times where people just don't have great asset tracking, and so they're able to just walk out the door with company devices. If you don't have GPS and RFID tracking every device in your network, it's very easy for them to walk out the door. And 60% of lost laptops just simply go missing and are never recovered and never really known what's happened. And of those, the truly scary thing is that only 1/3 of those missing laptops have full disk encryption for preventing a data breach, right? Some of the great examples we give here is Dropbox, not the world's most secure cloud file sharing platform. Dropbox had one of its developers' laptop stolen and or lost, and it contained an Excel dump of many of the user credentials to Dropbox, and accounts were, and that was considered a data breach. So the average cost of a last laptop and the data that's really on it is nearly $50,000. When you think about that, if you have 100 laptops and they're out there in the field, odds are you're going to lose at least 10 of those, not recover all 10, and you could be looking at a real loss in data, having to announce a public breach, making the headlines, and really even small organizations can make the headlines because, as you know, a single computer can easily contain the over 250 or over 500 record thresholds for things like HIPAA and SOX and other compliance areas. So you may have to be putting out a public statement to the local newspapers just with a single laptop loss. So it's really important that we get encryption done. We have mobile device management in place. According to another survey sponsored by Symantec, 37% of smartphone users store confidential business data on their phones. And only 40% of those surveyed work at companies that have corporate policies around wireless security. So I did a piece with Channel 53 in Milwaukee, just a reminder for people to not use public Wi-Fi. Use their hotspots, use corporate VPNs, do not use open Wi-Fi while you're out and traveling, particularly for business purposes or online purchases or online banking. And smartphones, it's so easy. If you haven't put in proper mobile device management, pretty easy for one of your employees to get an email with a client list attached. Here's the list of accounts we're going to go after. Here's a list of our clients that are past due. Here's names, addresses, phone numbers, financial information, and they hit forward on their mobile phone and send it over to their Gmail account. And again, this all really starts, just like Mindy was talking about, with good policies and then what we call incident response. So you have a policy about what happens when somebody reports a lost phone, and what is your incident response plan? Who is responsible for calling the carrier and canceling the device? Who is responsible for going into ActiveSync in Exchange or into your mobile device management platform and executing a remote wipe? What are you going to do? Are you going to print out the page with the success for the remote wipe as an indication that you don't need to do a public breach announcement? And then you need to put in incident remediation technology like remote wiping, like mobile device management. And today we're going to talk about how Microsoft has a stack that solves all these business risks. And Microsoft's not the only platform, but Microsoft has a really interesting price point and a really interesting suite of products to address these common issues that they see the business world have. So this product may not have heard of it as much, but Microsoft has had an MDM platform or mobile device management platform for some time. And it's called Windows Intune. So it's system management, it's patch management, So that's your Windows updates and so forth. Your software asset management, what's on my mobile devices, endpoint protection and antivirus, policy enforcement to prevent people from hitting forward in their email app and sending it over to their personal email address. And then encryption enforcement. Using inside of Windows is built in a full disk encryption technology called BitLocker. You just have to have paid for the licensing in order to enable the technology and have what's called a TPM or trusted platform chip inside of your laptop, which you probably already have. So a great platform, all hosted, all web-based. To get Microsoft Windows Intune set up, you simply can start paying by the month, whether you're using something Microsoft Cloud or not. If you're using the cloud already, very simple to add it on. If you're not, equally as simple to place an order, purchase the number of devices that you need to protect. And Microsoft Intune is one of the best MDM platforms for managing Apple devices, actually. So full support for Apple, Google and Chrome devices, as well as Windows devices as well. And that's only increasing with the advent of Windows 10, which was built around being managed by Windows Intune, with things like remote access, remote system imaging, and things like that. The future is that you'd be able to purchase a Windows laptop, set up somebody in Active Directory in Microsoft Azure, have them log in for the first time, and have access to all the software that they're supposed to have access to, and not have any access to software they're not. Fully endpoint protected, policy managed, and fully patch managed without any additional system setup. The next fire we're going to talk about is data leakage. Again, secure data lives on laptops. It leaves via personal email, client lists in Excel. If you're a law firm, you probably have templates that you've used for estate planning and other areas that you've used for a long time and have a lot of value to them. Then internal documents as well, just things about how you do your business, your internal process, and things like that. In one survey, the top concern among IT professionals regarding data leakage was the use of USB devices, with 33% sharing this concern globally. The number 2 concern was email, with 25%. When asked why their employees are less diligent in safeguarding intellectual property, 48% of IT professionals responded that employees are dealing with more information than ever before, and that 43% have listed a growing apathy towards security. So again, this is, I think, why you're seeing the staggering amount of data breaches that we have going on out there. First of all, we still have these great USB sticks, right? Plug them into a ubiquitous USB port that's on almost every device. And these USB sticks can have 32, 64, 100 plus gigs of data in a 1-inch device. Makes it extremely easy and portable. How does your business know for sure that your sales team isn't plugging in a USB device today, downloading a fourth of your entire network data and just doing that for 4 days and then walking out your door? As a law firm, how do you know that your entire copy of all of your estate planning templates and hot docs templates are not just being dumped onto a USB drive and being walked out? And we can't just be apathetic about it. And that's what the survey results tell us, is that the industry is feeling overwhelmed by security when you shouldn't be, that there are really easy solutions that are not super high cost that you can put into place to protect your network and protect data leakage and data from walking out. 11% of employees report that they or a fellow employee have accessed unauthorized information and sold it for profit or stole computers. Just a staggering number of people admitting that at the end of the day, people care about themselves and put in the wrong position. Even your employees may use IT for the wrong reasons. So what can you do? You can use something called Azure Rights Management, or RMS. So adding that to Office 365, or again, just using your on-premise file servers, you can connect to those file servers and integrate a classification infrastructure that will actually allow you to protect your Microsoft Office documents to the degree that you can actually restrict a Word file when it leaves your network, either on a USB device or over email. That Azure, one of the great things about the cloud is that it's everywhere. And so it can watch over your documents and ensure that your documents aren't being sent to the wrong place and aren't being opened. Azure can also watch over your documents and tell you where they've been and who's opened them. So it's a little, which is a pretty exciting technology if you think about it. The ability to take that Excel spreadsheet that goes through your accounts receivable, your Excel spreadsheet that's got all the pivot tables that helps you make spark lines and business decisions around your business growth. Wouldn't you feel better knowing that not only is that document protected, that if it were to ever leave, that the document would become unopenable, but even more than that, if it left and was attempted, even not even tried to access, but attempted to be accessed somewhere else, you could be email alerted that the file has left your network. You can be email alerted that someone's tried to open it, protect it, and potentially even indicate a remote wipe of an individual file. And it protects it on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. So again, Microsoft is not just a Windows-only platform. They have hooks and abilities and software to manage and monitor your data securely as it leaves the network entirely. Obviously, there's a downside to if you turn on there's a checkbox whenever you go to protect a file or again, using a classification infrastructure with the ability to immediately remote wipe a file. If you check that box, then anytime you try to open one of those documents, you'll have to have internet connectivity, right? Because what's going to happen is when you open that Excel file, it's going to go, that Excel file is going to go check in with Microsoft Azure, and if it can't reach it, it doesn't know if you should have access to it or not, and it's going to go ahead and restrict your access. But that doesn't mean you need to always have that immediate remote wipe feature on. Again, you can just have monitoring and other things enabled. But again, a great way to protect your files, and we get this all the time, people coming back to us after they think someone has left or an disgruntled employee has left, they come to us and say, well, we want to know if they copy data off the network. And our typical response is we don't know. Yeah, we can check the registry of their machine. What if they brought in their own machine? How do we decipher what was malicious copying versus okay copying as a part of their job? It's all incredibly difficult, and that's all reactive, and reactive is way more expensive. The cat's already out of the bag. You're really talking about digital forensic analysts and experts around data analytics, and this can all be stopped by getting into Azure RMS, being out ahead of this problem in your business. Fire 7 is identity. So it's pretty common for people to be able to do email phishing attacks, and that's where people send you an email, something with a really common theme to it. Hey, your Apple ID is out of date. Please click here and provide us, or email back with your updated credentials. Hey, your administrator is contacting you to update your Active Directory. All these types of emails that seem legitimate but are actually not. And it's pretty easy for people to get Active Directory passwords this way. By default, if you ever noticed, if you ever tried to take a Windows laptop home that was from work and you log in with your work login, it still works. It's called cached credentials. By default, in Windows domain controllers are the computers that deal with your authentication when you're in the office. That's what those servers do. Those by default allow those passwords to be cached 90 days. Unfortunately, if you lose that laptop or somebody gets a hold of it or a hacker gets onto that laptop, they can use that cache file to actually recover any passwords that have been used from that machine. So if your IT group was on that machine and used their administrative password to do work, they may get access to the administrative account and then be able to work their way laterally through the network. And that's, again, going to give them free access to remote access servers and move free within the environment. Don't want to name names because we never want to out clients that have had bad days, but we certainly have seen within the Madison area and around Wisconsin where users have provided Active Directory passwords over a phishing email or through a virus or keylogger, and people have gotten into terminal servers and via VPN and started doing nefarious things in the network, installing additional viruses, increasing their privilege, and really costing a lot of money for repair. The way you solve that in the Microsoft stack is called Azure Active Directory Premium. So again, Active Directory is what those domain controllers do. Active Directory is the name for that, the file structure that supports your login, the thing that contains your username and password and names. And right now that's just probably sitting in your servers at the office, and you have a first initial last name type login, and you have a single password. And all we do in IT today is beg and plead that password rotate and that it be complex, have 8 characters, number, letter, symbol, things like that. But really what the cloud allows us to do is to take that the next step further and actually install a single sign-on or ADFS or DirSync function that allows your on-premise Active Directory to talk to Microsoft's cloud. And Microsoft's cloud is one of the largest clouds in the world. Over 20 data centers. They have the second most fiber in the whole world. It's AT&T, then Microsoft, then Verizon. They have their own private darknet that interconnects all of their data centers. They have what's called hyperscale. They, by far, have the most data center capacity, compute capacity and network capacity than anybody else. You take Amazon and VMware and combine them, and they're not half of the data center capacity that what Microsoft has. And that's because Microsoft invests in it. $1.8 billion in R&D last year, and just has enough capital to scale out a high-end infrastructure. So I say all that to let you know that it's okay to extend part of your on-premise Active Directory into the cloud. Microsoft has it figured out. And since it's all Microsoft software, they're able to extend your credentials so that your users can just boot their laptop without VPN, without anything else, can just authenticate, not using cache credentials that may be old and that provide a security risk, but actively authenticate against the cloud no matter where their device is in the world. And increasingly, we're certainly seeing employers allow people to work from home, be a more mobile workforce. Again, the combination of these technologies, taking rights management and making sure that mobile workforce isn't sending your data elsewhere when they're not being watched in your office. Having mobile device manage it, restrict their device, let you remote wipe it if they lose it. And now with Azure Active Directory Premium, allow them to authenticate securely wherever they are in the world. Enables the mobile and mobile device workforce and BYOD, bring your own device workforce, to be effective. It also quickly adds multi-factor authentication. So one of the best ways we can get around that stale password battle that we always fight is to add what's called two-factor or multi-factor authentication, where your password isn't enough. That it's password plus somebody texting your phone or calling your phone with a key. When I mean someone, I mean an automated program or an app that's rotating through and it's giving you a new security token every 10 seconds. And it's your password, your authentication ID, plus that rotating key in order to get in. That way, if somebody gets a keylogger onto your machine and gets your password, that's fine. They're still not going to be able to log in as you. You're still not going to have a data breach because you have a second factor of authentication. And we're seeing Microsoft drive security forward here. Windows 10 has new hooks for Windows Hello, which is a facial recognition-based login system, and really driving the security and advanced two-factor authentication forward. And that's all going to be powered by Microsoft Azure and Active Directory Premium. So each of these fires all put out not only by Microsoft products, but Microsoft products that Microsoft has grouped into a single suite called the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And it's not just for enterprises, and it's not that expensive. For under $10 a user a month, you get hybrid identity management through Azure Active Directory Premium, mobile device management with Windows Intune, and information management through Azure Rights Management. These three products all combine under a single SKU, whether you have Office 365 or not. If you do have Office 365, very easy to add it on, very easy to enable it. With all these systems, it's one click to install it, and it's available in the cloud. That doesn't mean that one click gets you the entire deployment. You're still going to want a strong partner like information technology professionals to help make sure that these tools don't just go to waste, but that they're not only enabled, but enabled and then configured to do what they need to do for your environment, and that it's not optional to use Azure AD Premium and two-factor, and that it's not optional to have a device enrollment policy and an auto-enrollment policy within your network. And Microsoft Windows Intune, great platform, but with lots of depth. So if you don't work on the technical policies to actually restrict access, you might have the device in management, meaning you can remotely wipe it, you can push updates to it, and maybe it has antivirus on it, but you're not really using it to its fullest extent. Azure Rights Management, one click to enable, and as long as all your users are willing to, on a one-off basis, every time they create a Word document on the Honor system, protect that Word document, pretty easy installation. You want to go ahead and have a content manager running in your network to actually enforce the policy in an automated fashion. You're going to want to look to a great integrator from a local company that has experience getting this done for you. And oftentimes, if you're a larger enterprise, there may be even incentives to move you into these platforms. And for smaller organizations, the deployments can be simple, can be kept under a limited scope, and ultimately, again, under $10 a month per user is a pretty great price point for a suite of three products that almost guarantee to make your business more resilient and more secure. So Mindy and the Employer Group and myself, Paul Hager, CEO of Information Technology Professionals, want to thank you for joining us today. Whether you had an opportunity to see us in person in Madison or Milwaukee, we just wanted to thank you for watching this recording and hearing a little bit about what we had to say about how to reduce your risk in business. We hope it was helpful and it provided value, and we hope you continue to look for After Work Network events sponsored by ITP and its partner companies. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thanks, and have a great day.